Okay, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, we are going to walk in here to visit the museum, okay, and I will explain a few more things to you. What I told you, I'll come to us, show it to you on the map, and see a model of the Tel, the Canaanite city of Megiddo. And then, for those who feel like it, we will be walking up to the top of the hill to enjoy a panoramic view of the valley, you see. As I said, unfortunately,
That's
this
the
time we
valley
cannot
of
go through the tunnel.
Armageddon.
As you saw, the sign says it is closed because the steps leading down are broken and they are unrepaired. They have been finished. We are just Oh, ladies and gentlemen, when we were on the bus, come in a little closer, please. Why you are afraid? I'm not yet.
Why am I talking?
You might talk with your hands, or we might not get knocked out.
Have you ever heard of personal space?
So, I talked to you on the bus a little bit about the very big strategic importance of this country, and especially of the Valley of Jezreel, through which we have been driving a little while ago. And here we are standing in front of a map where I can show you on the map what I told you on the bus. The blue line which you see all around here is the line of the Mediterranean shore. This is Cyprus. This is Asia Minor, Turkey nowadays. Mesopotamia is in fact over here, you see. And this is Egypt. This triangle is Sinai. And this is the Arabian Peninsula. Now the historical Palestine, or the land of Israel, is this narrow strip of land here extending like a land bridge between the north and the south, Mesopotamia and Egypt. And all those white lines which you see going all around, those are the important routes which developed in this country. And the sea highway is the main one, in fact, going around here all the way along the Mediterranean shore. In fact, tomorrow, on our way towards Egypt, we will be driving on a road which is built on the traditional ancient road called the Sea Highway. You see? And when this road comes exactly here at this point, we have a range of mountains called the Carmel Range, which I showed you. It couldn't continue its way further up straight, so it had to turn inland, going through a narrow pass and ending up in the Valley of Jezreel, through which we drove. And at the very point where this route enters into the valley, in fact, man understood its very big strategic value, and already 5,000 years before Christ, he built on that spot a city which had been called Megiddo. So whoever mastered Megiddo could master easily the valley, and whoever mastered the valley could master the country itself, and one of the most important intersections of the Sea Highway. And in short here, I would like also to tell you about one of the characteristics of this land. And probably by telling you that, I would answer to a question which might be going around in your mind. Why did God choose this part of the world to reveal himself to humanity rather than somewhere else? Essentially, this country is a poor country. It doesn't have any resources whatsoever. Today, indeed, you can drive through very rich fields, very developed farming and agriculture. You will see that this afternoon even. In fact, one of the most important incomes of Israel, export items and income, is agriculture and agricultural products. But all this is due to modern technology. All this is due because they are able to solve the problem of water and irrigation. But solving the problem of water and irrigation came with modern technology. In ancient days, they couldn't do such things. And indeed, we see how God called man out of Mesopotamia here. In fact, Abraham obeyed when he heard that voice saying, "Leave your country and your people and go to a country which I will show you." Abraham was leaving a country which was far more developed than this country here. Mesopotamia is a very rich land. In fact, the word Mesopotamia means the land which is between the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. And this huge piece of land between these two rivers is most fertile because those two rivers can bring along with them so much organic material which is deposited on its banks when the rivers flood, and when the water retreats back to its course, the farmers go there, plow, and just have much water for irrigation, and you can't imagine how much food it can produce. Those rivers, in fact, enabled man there to produce enough food not only to survive themselves, but overproduce so much food so as to sell outside, get riches, and become more influential and affluential, and not only that, but not to be any more satisfied with the narrow boundaries of their country, but look forwards to more, and thus start conquering more lands and start invading more lands. So by the year 3000 before Christ, Mesopotamia reached to such a high degree of culture. It had such a huge empire. It had such a huge army, and they always looked forward to becoming the masters of the ancient Near East. The source of power for the Mesopotamians in those days were the rivers, the water. And so at a certain moment we see them worshipping those rivers because that's what counted for them. That those rivers gave them the power. We can say that God had to call Abraham out of Mesopotamia, out of the hustle and the bustle of this place with their very high degree of culture. God's voice, in fact, in such a place couldn't be heard. And that man called Abraham must be really admired, for he was able to identify that voice of God and obey it and come to a country which he did not know. But when he came to know, nevertheless he accepted to be there. Now we read in the Old Testament how the children of Israel end up in Egypt. You know, all that period in which the children of Israel are in Egypt, God somehow stops revealing himself to them. They had been there at least 400 years. Is there any revelation during those 400 years? No. It stops. For Egypt had quite much the same characteristics as Mesopotamia with the Nile Valley. Now, Egypt is a huge country. It's mainly desert. The narrow strip along the Nile River is most fertile. You will be there, you will see that. Indeed, compared to the 20th century farming, now it's very much behind Egypt. But they are living as they were living thousands of years ago, they're the Egyptian farmers. But if you take in consideration those days, the Nile Valley was for the Egyptians also the source of life, the source of their existence. They, in fact, got the power out of the Nile Valley. They got the food out of the Nile River. And in fact, we know that pharaohs of Egypt identified themselves with the Nile, and the Nile was worshipped as a god. So for them, the Nile River was everything. So God had to bring the children of Israel out of the valley of the land of Egypt and bring them once more to this country. And in that case, he starts revealing himself to mankind once more. On the other hand, this country here doesn't have rivers to trust in. There's a Jordan River, but it's down below the sea level, and they can hardly take the water from there to irrigate those small pieces of land along the Jordan River. This country depended on the rainfall so as to grow food. If you do remember yesterday, I tried to explain to you the meaning of a land which flows with honey and milk. And I told you that we must understand that with the terms of economy, not of the 20th century, but of biblical days, which meant that piece of property that each Jewish family would have owned would have given enough food for that family to survive during 1 year. It rains here only in winter time, I told you more than once. And indeed, you are helpless because there is nothing else you can trust. You look just up to the clouds passing, and you have to identify the one who created those clouds, who controls those clouds, who is above those clouds, and pray to that God which is above everything. Here, in other words, in this country, you learn to trust not something material, but you learn to trust the Creator. While in other countries of the ancient Near East, you trusted a river. And regardless how you lived, whether you obeyed or you didn't obey, whether you did well or you didn't do good, those rivers would have continued to come down with their water. But in this country, God said, I will take you to a land where I will send the first rain and the last rain in its time. I will let you live in cities which you never built. You will eat from the fruits of trees which you never planted. I will bless you. I will bless your animals also. You will see your children. You will see your children's children. I will defend your cities from the enemies, provided that you obey. If you don't obey, I will stop the rain. And how many times we see God stopping the rain, having drought and famine. I will open your country to the enemies to come and conquer it. You will be carried away. Your children will be carried away. It will be disastrous for you. So what is very interesting is this. God gives freely as a gift, we see, to the children of Israel, but He demands, on the other hand, obedience to His commandments. It is, in fact, in this country where you can learn to trust God. But it's not a one-way process. It's a two-way process. Remember, with the Canaanites, it was always one-way process. The Canaanites who lived prior to the arrival of the children of Israel to this country had their gods also. But it was always man to give to those cruel gods. Actually, those gods were the creation of the hands of man, represented by those very few priests of those gods, who did not do anything but to take advantage of the whole thing. But indeed, with the God Yahweh of Israel, it was completely different. He was a God who gave first, but also who asked. It is a balance, in fact, very much balanced. It's not a cruelty at all as it was in the Canaanite pagan world. So I don't see any other country where such a thing would have been really possible to develop. In fact, God did not reveal Himself to mankind as a flashlight. He started revealing Himself to mankind slowly. Go through the Genesis. You will see God speaking to Abraham in very simple terms. And hand by hand, that man comes to understand God, somehow, God reveals himself more fully and more and more, and the whole thing is fulfilled later on with the fulfillment of the promises. Amigo Mer, let's say that. Exactly. So you see how even with Jesus, with the birth of Jesus, which is the fulfillment, God reveals himself in such a profound way. Can you compare Jesus, God revealed himself through Jesus to man with the way God revealed himself to Abraham? To Abraham as a baby, Jesus revealing himself to mankind, or God revealing himself to mankind through Jesus is the fullness. So I always think that this might be one of the reasons why God chose this country and not somewhere else, because here he could reveal himself to mankind in a way that man could trust him. There was no other material thing which would have overcome that trust at all. Now let's move inside there. Of Jericho, you remember, and over there I tried to explain to you what is a tell. And I told you that a tell is a mound or a hill which can be considered man-made and came to existence through building and destruction activities through the centuries. Here we are standing in front of a model which shows us the tell, which is here called Megiddo. In fact, this tell did not exist 5,000 years before Christ. It was then that man chose this particular site for its strategical importance, nearby a spring, nearby this international route, and he chose this site and he started building or living on this site, and so the building and destruction activities started and continued on during 5,000 years, and as a result of that, we have this tell or this tell. This place was extensively excavated by by the Oriental Institute of Chicago in the 1920s, because Megiddo had been mentioned so many times in the Old Testament. It had been mentioned so many times in Mesopotamian texts and sources, as well as Egyptian texts and sources. So it was beautifully documented, and thus they thought that this might be one of the most important and interesting sites to excavate. So they started excavating it in the 1920s, and they were planning then to dig this tell layer by layer by layer by layer and make it disappear the way it was formed. But after a few years of work and spending about $2 million in the 1920s, that was quite a big sum of money, they came to the conclusion that such a work was impossible. And so, before abandoning the site, before running completely out of money, they came here to the eastern part of the hill, and they dug a trench, what we would call the archaeological trench, so as to study a little bit the stratigraphy of the hill. And indeed, it was then that they fixed that man came to live here about what we call the Chalcolithic period, which means 5,000 years before Christ, and on up to the Roman period, which means more or less in the days of Jesus. In fact, those buildings which they found on the bedrock were of the Chalcolithic period. In the fifth layer of the tell, when they excavated the site, they found the remains of very large buildings, and those large buildings were identified as the stables. And in those days, they thought that those would be the stables which were built by Solomon. And in fact, here you can see those buildings reconstructed. Indeed, when they excavate, this is not the way they find. What they found are miserable remains of the foundations of the buildings. And by finding the foundations, they can reconstruct the plan and even the upper structure. And so this is the way they think the town of Megiddo, the city of Megiddo, looked like around the 10th or the 9th centuries before Christ, but improperly they were identified with Solomon, and so they called them Solomon's stables. In fact, in old literature about the site, you will read that in Megiddo they found the chariot city of Solomon. But recently, the Hebrew University archaeologists carried on some archaeological digs here, and they were able to prove that those buildings here, it's true they were stables, but they dated back to the days of one of the successors of Solomon in the kingdom of Israel. They were able to prove that those stables dated back to the days of Ahab, king of Israel. So nowadays we call those Ahab's stables, and not anymore Solomon's stables.
Would they have been passed down?
Pardon me?
Would they have been passed on down?
No, they were built then, and that's
Oh, built then.
Yes. Now, over there, you see that complex of buildings. That was the main gate or the main entrance into the city of Megiddo. We will see some remains later on. Let me pass to the other side, which shows to build his settlement nearby a spring of water. And indeed, here too there was a spring of water. Now, when this hill did not exist before it was formed, the spring which was here and the original level of the hill were at the same level. So whenever they built their walls around the settlement, they could include with the spring within the walls. But when this hill was formed slowly, the spring remained here, down below. Whenever they built the walls around the settlement, they always wanted to use those very steep slopes as part of the defense system. Because before the enemy would have arrived or reached to the wall, they had to overcome the steepness of the mountainside or the hillside. But in that case, if they would have built the walls up here, they should have left the spring outside. And if the city would have been besieged, the enemy would have first of all tried to poison the water here. And then they would have had a choice to include the spring within the walls by coming down here with the walls and then up once more. But this would have been always strategically a very weak point that the enemy would have attacked here first the city. Anyway, in the days of Ahab, king of Israel, they solved this problem in a magnificent way. They came to a point nearby the spring and they dug a shaft down in the rock to reach the level of the spring. And once they were at the same level of the spring, they connected the bottom of the shaft and the spring itself with a tunnel hewed in the rock. Then they camouflaged the spring outside. So when the enemy was here, they wouldn't have known that the spring was here. They knew the spring was somewhere around, but they would have never known that it was here. While the people besieged in the city would have walked down the shaft and carried back water to their homes. Last day.
Tony, you'll miss us.
More of our group in there.
You're not finished. You haven't started yet.
The guard rooms. This is the northern entrance to the city.
That's when Solomon lived.
As you can see,
1,000 years
the remains of the guard rooms.
little bit closer, and I will point out to you the most important places around the valley. First of all, the mountains which are over there to the left-hand side, which is the north, those are the mountains of Galilee. And Nazareth is built on the top of those mountains. Now about 11 o'clock from us, you see that round, dome-shaped mountain that is called Mount Tabor. And we drove at the foot of Mount Tabor yesterday, probably the site of the Transfiguration. So there is another tradition which puts it from the Transfiguration on Mount Hermon, which is 9,000 feet above the sea level. But it's out of hand, it's out of the area of the ministry of Jesus. Straight ahead of us, 12 o'clock, you can see some mountains. No. Straight ahead of us all, okay? 12 o'clock. Ahead of me, us. Alright. There are those mountains which are called the mountains of More, M-O-R-E-H, which really did not play an important role in the Old Testament days. And then you see the straight continuation of the valley of Jezreel into the valley. And that section is called the Valley of Ben-Shammai. I will mention to you Shammai. The mountains which you see 1 o'clock from us, those are the mighty descent suddenly drops into the Mediterranean Sea at the point where Haifa, where we'll have lunch, is built. And you see the two peaks over there. And I don't know whether you can identify on the first peak to the left, a small white building. That mountain there is Mount Carmel.
Yeah.
In fact, that's a place where we commemorate the confrontation of Elijah the prophet with the 450 priests of Baal. And then after that the sacrifice was consumed by the fire which came down from heaven, Elijah tells to seize the prophets of Baal and take them down into the Kishon Valley. And so those prophets of Baal are killed there at the Kishon Valley, or the Brook Kishon, which goes through the valley towards Haifa. And on the way to Haifa, in fact, we will see the Kishon Brook, where the prophets of Baal were killed, were stoned. Okay? Any questions, please? The archaeologists, and here they found the remains of some Canaanite temples, and all of them dated back to around the middle of the Middle Bronze Age, which means about 2,000 years before Christ. And you see that very large round building made of stone. That was a Canaanite altar. Now there is a difference between a Canaanite, how they built their altars, while the Canaanites indeed built them in different ways. Okay?
When they dig this, do they get big machinery or they just...
No, absolutely not. Else they would ruin all the evidences. It is a work of patience with picks and sometimes even with a spoon and a small brush.
Where is the hitting spring
I thought maybe they'd get down.
that they use to come into it? Where's the entrance?
On the completely opposite side of the hill.
Otherwise, it'd been hard to come in on that, or it'd been easy this way, wouldn't
Yeah.
it?
The road. Mediterranean Sea. That is the Mediterranean Sea. It's real hazy today. You can't really see a lot of boats out in the harbor. Different tankers. Those are not nuclear reactors, that's off of a refinery cooling towers. And the city of Haifa. It's like an army or Marines. It's a helicopter ship. Attack ship.
Couldn't be.
It's a, yeah, that's what it is, helicopter attack ship. Okay, you're on. Come on this way. Come this way.
Not where you do it, isn't it? Let me get a picture of that dome down there too. I forgot about it. Well, here.
Is it good up here?
That's not the one he was talking about. No.
They said the gold dome was one that's talking about.
Oh, over there, yes, that's it. I saw this one here. Yeah, that's the one there.
It is. Got a real good picture of the concrete. It's a new religious order that's found at headquarters in Haifa. Okay. It's the Roman aqueduct. Mediterranean Sea out through there. They got that. It was about 6 miles long, this aqueduct, built by the Romans to bring water to the city. Rick Riley, yep, from the sea.
Scale than what it was before. And we are going to see the remains of the Crusaders' town, which was really a fortress. This fortress was surrounded with a wall which is preserved in a very good shape. Down there you'll see it. And also a moat. But this was a dry moat. For the bottom of this moat is higher than the Mediterranean, so all the water which they would have put into this moat would have run back to the sea. But indeed, the idea was to make it difficult. The gateway must have been very strategically built. First of all, they had a bridge which was... those were originally used in paving the Roman streets of Caesarea, reused by the Crusaders once more. So this Crusader, Roman, but reused by the Crusaders. So we will be walking on the street and we will go towards the harbor. And while we are walking here, I think that I have to recall to your mind once more that somewhere around here there are two very important sites about which we do not know, where they are exactly. But we might be walking on the very site without knowing it. And first of all, the place where Cornelius lived. You remember, Cornelius is the first Gentile who was baptized here by Peter. Somewhere around here must have been also the prison where Paul was kept for over 2 years before appearing in front of the king, the queen, and Bernie, and the governor, and defended himself and gave his testimony and told about his conversion on the way to Damascus. So the prison must have been somewhere around here, as well as the house of Cornelius. I can't point out to you the sites, but we might be walking all over them or near them without knowing.
This is the fortress built on the ruins of Caesarea, built by the Crusaders. This is one of the roads leading into Caesarea, the fortress built by the Romans.
Is this where all them stones are down here where we took them pictures?
And it could have been the podium. Podium means the foundation of a large building, which might have been the temple which was dedicated to Caesar Augustus. You see, the city was called Caesarea, and so the main temple in the city was Caesar's temple. Here we can understand the very ambiguous character of Herod the Great, who on the one hand would have built a temple dedicated to God, Yahweh of the Jews, And on the other hand, he wouldn't have hesitated to build temples to pagan gods. And Caesar Augustus was the first emperor to claim to be worshipped as God even during his lifetime. The other emperors were claimed to be worshipped after their death. But this one was a man who wanted to be worshipped even during his lifetime. Okay, so this is the Temple of Augustus, or the podium of the Temple of Augustus in Caesarea. All right, folks, the 40-minute. Then it's hard to walk in the street and read it. But Israel doesn't buy anything from Egypt. Food stuff from Egypt.
What you're doing?
Yes.
Take it out the door here then.
Yes, you will all catch the flight in Jordan. How Herod the Great built a harbor here. In fact, it was a double harbor. The outer harbor was here, and the inner harbor was here inside. In the land. Which were storage houses, and they could load and unload whatever they carried. Now the inner harbor was built up with sand and dirt. It wasn't in this harbor that all sail was. Okay, it was in that boat. Here?
Oh, right there.
Oh, here. Good, good. Yes.
Any of this built back up by the archaeologists, or is it the way they found it?
Oh, the large building over there is about 100 years old, repaired recently, and it's a restaurant now. All the rest are the archaeological finds, you see, where you see those columns, those pieces of walls falling into the water. But nothing really was rebuilt by the archaeologists. Those arches are Roman time, okay? The Roman period. Okay, back to the bus.
We're here on the still in the Mediterranean Sea. Fishermen fishing out here on the reefs. This is the Gaza Strip, right?
Yeah. Oh, that shot. That must be their harvesting their wheat or.
Shooting us out of the bus in Gaza Strip.
Oh, look at those.
We're just getting what we're getting, I guess. We're gonna run out of battery. This is almost like on horseback going down to Petra.
No. I think we're in the, I don't think we have. I think we just went, are in the.
Alright.
During the Gaza
Men شو اسمه؟
Yeah, that's a dog in front of us.
Yeah, I'm got him right now in my sights. You don't have to slow down for me.
Here's one policy.
The one is coming facing us.
Oh, for goodness sake, sure. Date,
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Jay, if you want a date?
I don't think I care for one day.
I think that's nice. You've been married how many years and you're still asking her if she wants a date? That's nice.
Now, the only thing I did,
How long you have had it?
This, 2 years.
it was crazy. It was backwards, you know.
Oh yes. You see the way people dress here, long dresses. That's a traditional dress, and that's the way they dress all the time. Okay, not only when they go out, but at home too.
Hot.
It looks hot, yes, but those people are used to it. Look to your left.
Well, they have other clothing underneath them. When they sweat, it serves as insulation.
Right.
It's
Holding
water in. It's like wearing a sweatshirt over your shirt.
Right.
so anxious for Larry.
Here's Cairo. Cairo.
What do you think?
Cairo.
Would it not lose your mother?
No, I'll go back to Jerusalem.
I like moving to Tiberias.
Take up.
That is.
At your left side you can see the citadel, the fortress which built by Saladin in 1200 AD. I'd like to pay your attention to something when we'll arrive the citadel. We are going to leave the bus and we'll walk about 7 minutes walking to the mosque, okay? While this time some people they come to rush behind you and to ask you to change money. Please don't change any money around the area here, because you know the people will offer you a very good rate, but even if they offer you a very good rate, you will get cheated around the area. Then please don't put yourself in any troubles. The other thing which I'd like to pay your attention, it's some people, they are coming to ask you to buy some of their bananas. It's like a papyrus, but that's not real. I'm sorry, that's not real papyrus. That is banana. That's why they sell it very cheap, but it's useless to buy it because it's not a papyrus. It's a banana. As soon as you get it, the color will take off and it will broken. Then please, for papyrus, you can wait until the end of the tour, or maybe after museum we are going to visit all together.
Policeman.
Marcia Barnett said that when I get back, they may have me do assembly at school, you know, and show pictures and talk about it and that kind of stuff. If I can borrow it, wear it with my little thing. Yes.
Here's my camera.
They need you in the bus.
Your wife wanted to know where you were.
Hey,
She was down there. Oh, there she is. Got it straight. He got it on the camera. Wherever you want.
we got it.
You got one good one? Let's go.
Yeah, I want probably.
Hey.
As far as I go.
How many does it? Every time. Oh my gosh. They're going to clean him. Get a picture, Mother. She gets up
picture. She'll take it.
I've said before we have 9 big ones, 9 big one, 3 big one and another 6 small one. Then in Giza we have 9, in Saqqara we have 28, in Maijum we have another 2, in Dahshur we have another 3, in Fayum we have another 11, in Abu Sir another 3. It's altogether 75 pyramids in Egypt. Yeah. We are driving through Sahara now. As you know, the whole Egyptian land is like a desert. As you crossed yesterday through Sinai. The desert, yes. The desert at the west side of the Nile, we call it Arabian Desert. The other one at the west side of the Nile, at the east side we call it Arabian, at the west side where we are now we call it Libyan Desert. This is the same desert which is going to Libya. But both of the desert we call it Sahara. The Sahara is the Arabic word for desert. Yes. We are going to Sphinx, right? Necropolis of Giza. This boat excavated in 1954 by Kamal Mallar, the Egyptian engineer. The boat made of cedar wood and used just once to carry the body of the king from the capital to the necropolis of Giza after his death. You can see the boat through the glass inside the building. Can you see? This boat made in 2700 BC, excavated in 1954. Again, you see the other 3 small pyramids at the left side for daughters and wife of the king Khaf at the left side. If you look from a distance over the round hill at the right side, you can see the modern cemetery. Can you see it? The cemetery which is all shaded by the trees. That is the cemetery, the modern cemetery for the people to bury. Just right now at the right side you can see the Sphinx.
There it is.
Can you see the Sphinx right now at the right side? That is the lot. From that rock, the architect, they quarried the stone to make the temples. During the time of the king Khephren, after the architect quarried the stone and made the temples, he tried to remove away the rest of the hill. But when he saw that the shape of the rest of the hill take the shape of the animal's body, then he just carved the hill to be as a lion body with the human head. The lion body to show the strength of the king, the human head to show the wisdom of the king Khephren himself. This statue carved in 2700 BC showing the face of the king Khephren wearing the name is the headdress. This statue worshipped by the people as the god Hur-Akhid, the god of the sky. During the time of the new kingdom, the whole statue was hidden under sand. They said that one of the royal princes came to this area to hunt. He was running, hunting from the area, he got tired. He tried to rest under the shade of the sand. When he rested, he slept. Then he dreamed. He saw in his dreaming that the god of the statue came to him and asked him to remove away the sand which he covered him. And he promised him, if you will remove away the sand which covered me, I will give you the throne of Upper and Lower Egypt. I will support you, I will let you to be the king of the 2 lands. After this royal prince woke up, he went to the capital, sent the people to the area, who they came and they took the sand away, then they appeared the statue again. They started to worship the statue again as a god during the time of the new kingdom. This royal prince became a king. When he became a king, he wrote down his story on the red ground stele.